Hello guys, today we'll be covering a 1993 American coming-of-age drama film called What's Eating Gilbert Grape? In the small town of Andorra, two brothers named Gilbert and Arnie Grape are waiting for the arrival of a carnival group that's camping across the highway. Gilbert's in charge of looking after his younger brother Arnie, who's intellectually disabled. We're then introduced to the rest of the Grape family. The eldest sister, Amy, handles all the household cleaning and cooking, whereas the youngest sister, Ellen, doesn't really get along with Gilbert, and instead she focuses on her appearance to divert herself from her troubled family life. Their mother, Bonnie, who was once incredibly beautiful, is now miserable and morbidly obese. It turns out that Bonnie has not left the house since her husband committed suicide by hanging himself in the basement 7 years ago. Now Arnie's ready to celebrate his 18th birthday, which is significant given that his disease made it unlikely that he'd live to this age. Therefore, the entire family's busy preparing for his birthday celebration. Gilbert works at a small grocery store nearby, and Arnie joins him there every day. On the other hand, Ellen works at the ice cream shop next to Gilbert's workplace. One afternoon, Gilbert's asked to deliver some groceries to a customer named Betty Carver, and he takes Arnie with him. Upon reaching there, Gilbert asks Arnie to remain in the car, and Betty sends her kids outside to play. The two then begin to make out, but are stopped when Betty's husband arrives home earlier than intended. Unaware of his wife's affair, Betty's husband offers Gilbert a cash tip and asks him to call soon, stating that he needs to discuss something. As Gilbert's about to leave, he's surprised to see that Arnie is not in the car. Meanwhile, the police show up, and it's discovered that Arnie's climbing the water tower, which has recently become his habit. When the cops try to get Arnie to come down using the megaphone, he ignores them. Gilbert then sings a song for Arnie, which finally convinces him to come down. He then apologizes to the police for his brother's behavior and promises that this would not happen again. Later, Gilbert and his family talk about the preparations for Arnie's upcoming 18th birthday. Ellen starts to argue with Gilbert for not coming up with any ideas. Meanwhile, Gilbert's best friend, Tucker, shows up to repair some malfunctioning electronics. As he works on the repair, a small boy and his friends approach the window to catch a glance at Bonnie. Apparently, Bonnie's state of severe obesity is a joke and a laughingstock, even among small children. Gilbert raises the boys so he can see Bonnie clearly, but Tucker believes that this is inappropriate since it encourages his mother's humiliation. Next, a young woman named Becky enters the store to do some grocery shopping. She was supposed to go camping in her caravan, but due to her mother's car breakdown, they're compelled to stay in Andorra. Gilbert's clearly captivated by her beauty, and the two lock gazes as she passes. And since there are a lot of groceries, Gilbert and Arnie accompany her home to help with the delivery of her stuff. When they return from Becky's RV, Gilbert and Arnie join their family for dinner. The family's still making preparations for Arnie's birthday party, which is 6 days away. Gilbert and Ellen begin to argue again to the point of bringing up their dead father. Frustrated by this, Bonnie gets up and starts stomping on the floor, asking them to stop fighting with each other. And at that moment, Gilbert realizes that the floor of their house where Bonnie was sitting seems to be in trouble. So they make another call to Tucker to check on the condition of their basement without the mother's knowledge. Tucker warns that the base wood is very old and the floor will collapse if left unchecked. He then leaves, promising to return the next morning with wood to repair the house. Next, Bonnie's sleeping on the couch while watching television. Amy advises her to sleep upstairs in her bed, but she refuses, claiming she's much more comfortable on the couch. It turns out that Bonnie's body makes it impossible for her to climb the stairs, and she hasn't slept in her bed in years. The next day, Gilbert notices Ellen chasing Arnie, who's about to climb the water tower again. After that, Ellen starts hitting Arnie and throws him to the ground. Gilbert's furious seeing this and scolds Ellen, telling her that no one's allowed to raise a finger to him. He then asks her to leave and takes Arnie inside to treat his wounds. After dropping Arnie off at his house, Gilbert makes his way to the area where Becky set up her camper. There, she invites him to eat dinner with her and her grandmother. Her grandmother boasts that Becky has traveled the globe, while Gilbert becomes embarrassed by the fact that he's never left Andorra. Soon after that, Becky and Gilbert go out for ice cream, where Betty notices them and becomes jealous. The two then leave to watch the sunset together, but Gilbert suddenly recalls that it's Arnie's bath time. He then asks Becky to wait for a while and rushes back home. Eager to get back to Becky, Gilbert informs Arnie that he's old enough to take his own bath, to which Arnie agrees. After instructing him how to leave the bathtub and dry himself, he goes back to Becky and they spend some time together. The next morning, Gilbert wakes up and rushes to the bathroom, where he's surprised to see Arnie still in the bathtub, trembling from the cold. His family scolds him for negligence, and Arnie's now traumatized to even go near water. That afternoon, Gilbert gets a call to make another grocery delivery to Betty. When he gets there, Betty's upset and visibly jealous of the time he's spending with Becky. She then tricks him into calling her husband, and Gilbert is compelled to meet Mr. Carver at his office. He assumes that Mr. Carver would confront him about his affair, but it turns out he was asked to meet Gilbert to talk about his family's insurance policy. In the meantime, Betty calls Mr. Carver and asks him to return home immediately. Then Mr. Carver requests a ride from Gilbert to his home. Although he feels uncomfortable in this situation, he agrees to drive him. When the two get to Mr. Carver's house, they discover smoke coming out of the kitchen window and an upset Betty sitting on her porch. While Mr. Carver tries to calm the situation and asks his children to play with them in the kids' pool, Betty approaches Gilbert and states that she'll not tolerate him rejecting her. However, Gilbert doesn't respond anything to her and heads home. Later that night, the family's watching television when Ellen returns home and lets them know that Mr. Carver has passed away. Gilbert and Arnie then drive to the Carver house, which is now under police investigation. They find Tucker outside the house, who informs them that Mr. Carver drowned in the kids' pool after suffering a heart attack. The following day, while hanging out with his friends, Gilbert notices Becky riding her bike. On Arnie's insistence, the three of them head to the lake for a swim. Gilbert and Becky enter the lake, but Arnie, who still has a fear of the water, refuses to swim. After swimming, Becky and Gilbert lay down side by side on the ground. He's so absorbed in his talk that he fails to notice that Arnie has fled to the water tower again. He panics and tries to look for Arnie. Then he notices a couple of police cars passing by. This time, Arnie has reached the top of the tower, and the fire department arrives in a crane to lower him. Despite Gilbert's pleas, the police are tired of this recurrent incident, and they arrest Arnie and take him to jail. When Gilbert gets home, he contacts the police station and begs them to let Arnie go, but they don't listen to him. Bonnie gets frustrated and decides to take matters into her own hands. She asks that Gilbert take her to the police station, and for the first time in 7 years, she leaves the house. Before Bonnie goes inside, Gilbert rushes in and tries to solve the problem, but the police officer still refuses to release Arnie. Just then, Bonnie arrives and screams at the police for holding her son. Seeing Bonnie's aggressive behavior, the policeman becomes scared and he orders Arnie to be released. As they return to the car, the townspeople gather and everyone stares at Bonnie and makes fun of her obesity. This experience clearly affects Bonnie, as she appears distressed and refuses to eat anything during family dinner. Later, Gilbert goes to see Becky, who compliments Bonnie on her bravery. She says she wants to meet Bonnie personally, but Gilbert feels hesitant as his mother doesn't want to meet outside people. Then they end up embracing each other in a kiss. In the next scene, the Grape family attends Mr. Carver's funeral. After the ceremony, Betty visits the supermarket and informs Gilbert that she and her sons are relocating to St. Louis to begin a new life. She asks Gilbert whether he believed she killed her husband, because many residents of the town believe she was responsible for his death. She then tells Gilbert that she hopes her sons become like him when they grow up, and walks out. Gilbert drives Becky to her camper, which has finally started working. They go to the new Burger Barn's grand opening, where Tucker's one of the first employees. Becky informs Gilbert that she and her grandma will be leaving Endora tomorrow now that her RV's been repaired. Arnie invites Becky to his birthday celebration the next day, but Gilbert advises her not to go. They then say goodbye to each other and part ways. A while later, Arnie still refuses to take a bath, so Gilbert chases him around the home. While running away, Arnie knocks into Amy, smashing the birthday cake she was carrying. Having no other option, Gilbert is forced to shop at Foodland, a grocery store that competes with the one he works at. As he leaves Foodland carrying the cake, he runs into his boss, and the two exchange a silent stare, realizing that Gilbert has betrayed his employer by shopping at the rival grocery store. When he gets home, he tells Arnie not to touch the cake and starts to prepare for the celebration the next day. However, Arnie still eats the cake, which makes Gilbert angry, and he tries to forcefully take Arnie to the bathtub. When he refuses, Gilbert becomes enraged and badly beats him for the first time in his life. He then feels guilty and rushes out of the house. In the meantime, Arnie also runs away to Becky's campsite. Becky tends to his injuries and the two go swimming together. A while later, Gilbert also shows up and feels guilty for what he did to his brother. He watches from a distance as Amy and Ellen pick Arnie up. Becky spots Gilbert hiding in the bushes and goes over to him. He tells Becky that he hit Arnie and shares his frustration and sadness with her. He also tells her about his father's death and his mother's life before becoming obese. Moments later, they kiss and spend the night sleeping under the stars together. Gilbert runs home the next day as it's Arnie's birthday. Feeling bad over hitting Arnie the previous night, he inquires about his brother's whereabouts with Amy to apologize to him. Arnie suddenly jumps from the tree, and the two hug each other and reconcile. Gilbert then enters the home to speak with Bonnie, who's embarrassed to go outside despite having huge plans for the celebration. She regards herself as a burden and claims that she's brought only shame and humiliation upon the family. She cries and grabs Gilbert in her arms, pleading with him not to leave again. After the party, Tucker informs Gilbert that their home is in danger of collapsing, but Gilbert's distracted by the sight of Becky's RV approaching his home. He brings Becky with him to meet his mother. Despite their initial discomfort, the two are friendly and seem to enjoy each other's company. After that, Becky and her grandmother bid them farewell in the hope that they would cross paths again. After the party, the family watches in disbelief as their mother ascends the stairs and enters her room, something she hasn't done in a long time. After some difficulty, she reaches her room where Amy and Ellen put her into bed. Gilbert brings her water, and she thanks him for everything he's done for the family. Soon after, Arnie enters the room and tries to wake Bonnie, but she remains still. Although he initially believes she's playing a joke on him, he eventually understands Bonnie's died. Then all four children enter Bonnie's bedroom and grieve together. Sometime later, when the police show up, they inform Gilbert that further help is required to take out Bonnie's body due to her weight. When the cops leave, they jokingly say that they need the National Guard to get Bonnie out of the house. Gilbert's angry with himself and takes it out in the basement of the house. He doesn't want his mother to be humiliated and therefore begins to consider alternate burial choices. The siblings then remove all the valuables from the home, and when they're done, Gilbert sets the house on fire. Their mother is therefore cremated in her own home as her ultimate resting place. A year later, Arnie approaches his 19th birthday, and the brothers do their yearly custom of waiting for a caravan of camping trucks. It turns out that Amy has left Andorra to run a bakery in Des Moines, while Ellen is planning to change schools. The movie ends as Arnie and Gilbert are approached and welcomed by Becky and her grandmother to travel with them.